Hello, today I'm going to show you how to paint a rough sea with the waves breaking on the rocks and beach. The rocks, because they're wet, are very, very dark, but the headland's more indistinct. So what I'm going to do is wet it first, lower down. I'll leave that to soak for a minute. I haven't gone up to the skyline. And I'm going to mix a cool green with Viridian and French ultramarine. Then add a little bit of yellow ochre just to warm it up a little bit. And I'm going to do streaks. Going up to the top. Then I'm going to make a very dark brown out of burnt sienna and indigo, and get a smaller brush and just drop that in around the shape of the cliff. And then I can come back and give it a second coat, but I want to show the shape of the cliff before I do anything else because it defines the picture. So I'm just putting it on, and then I will come back and pull it down, but I want to get the firm shape first. So I'm now going to get a bigger brush, which is slightly damp. Just pull the paint back. The focus of the picture's on the waves, but it needs something at the back to punctuate it. Now I'm going to get the same bigger brush and just do downward strokes again over the slightly damp green. It's had a moment to dry. And then just lose some of them. That now looks distant, so I can move forward. I need to plan the picture. Now you need to look from the front of the picture to the back, and there's a handy gap in the rocks here and a few changes of water where it's going waves and troughs and waves, and there's a colour change in some of them where they're in each other's shadow, and that will help the white bouncy foam show more. Make a little map of where the dark areas are. It's very easy to get lost in a picture where there's lots and lots of changes, and it's important that you're led into the picture. We've got the waves and leading you through the gap, and that's quite important. There's one or two other areas that I can just make a few marks to help me in the same way. You could put latex down. Now the sky in this case was cloudy at the bottom and then a line of blue at the top. So what I'm going to do is wet the page down to the horizon, around the rock. Just take the wet lines up slightly. But I've mixed cobalt violet and French ultramarine and just warmed it up a little bit with cobalt turquoise. And I'm going to put a line in just above the horizon. And then I'm going to work up and down from it. It is very pale, but it will give the picture visual impact. And then as it goes further up, slightly darker, so go back in with the same colour, but just drop it in on top of the existing paint. And then at the top there's some clouds and then blue sky, so I've just got the French ultramarine and I'm just going to make a wavy edge. I don't want the sky too busy because the waves are busy. Let's add a little bit more paint. Just make the very top of the page very dark. It won't look as dark when the brown rocks go in. Then dry the brush off, it's quite clean now, and just lose the edge. And then again, lose the top edge here, just get them to gently merge, but leaving a slight gap as a hint of cloud. Just put some of the lines slightly sideways to make them less defined. And I'm just going to drop in a little bit of Naples yellow, which will send some of the pigment away. Just at the bottom of the clouds. Now moving forward to the brown rocks, and I want a warm brown, so I'm mixing indigo and burnt sienna again, and some of the rocks have got spray showing over them, so I've got to decide where to bleed the paint off to sort of next to nothing to show the hint of spray. So I've mixed up a big puddle of brown paint, and I'm now going to go in with a small brush and find the edge of the rock. Just go around very gently, find anything of interest that defines the rock, and then go back in with more of burnt sienna. And then there's splash coming up there, so what I need to do with the number 1 brush is just do brush strokes up, leaving white paper showing. There's a hint of the water hitting the rock, and then go from the top and drop in some more of the darker mix, and it'll find its own way down. And there's another rock that's going in front of it, so I'm just gently going to put the line of that in, and again bring it down just to give a hint of waves going up. You could use latex, but I think brush gives a better edge. And the very tall rock, see, it's sending the sky back nicely now. Let's put that one in as it's darker. And dropping in some white paint. Dropping in some lighter paint and darker paint just to give the rock contours. And then coming down, just pulling the paint down again in lines to show that there's water splashing up. And I'm continuing along to the next rock, just putting a lot of paint on in the middle and then moving the paint out. Adding some burnt sienna elsewhere on it. It'll find its own way. And then on the right hand side there's quite a slope and more water splashing in. So the water seems to be splashing in from the seaward side, so I'm just going to do a few strokes just to indicate that. Then merge the other colours together. And there's a very lost edge at the bottom because the waves are rebounding off the rock. So just take the brush for a walk. And then I can come back and tint the waves shortly. And this rock does actually almost touch the next one. And then coming further along, there's water creeping between the two. So I need to just put in a few strokes. And there's quite a lot of water going up the rock, so it seems to be the more exposed one. getting the water from both sides. So I'll put a few marks in and then claim the edge. Starting with the burnt sienna this time, because it's lighter at the top where the waves aren't quite going all the way up. And bringing it down and forward. And this one gets darker towards the bottom, so I'm going to use a little bit more indigo. So I'll fill in some of the white paper because that takes away the impression of the water going in. And then there's another rock down here that I'll make slightly lighter, so I'm just adding more burnt sienna to that one. It's only lighter because of its shape, that the light is hitting the top as well, where the very tall one, there isn't a lot to show. So put darker behind it and darker at the waterline, which will help the white waves show up. And then there's another rock here with a gap for water. So I'll leave a gap for that. Put in a bit of brown. But there are a few more rocks that I can put in right at the front. And then I need slightly lighter paint, so I'm just going to dilute it slightly for a rock further back that's more attached to the other headland. And the water does come down further, but I'm going to let that dry and add that in a minute. I've given these a moment or two to dry because I need to put definition on this one, but to start with I'm just going to have a little go at the hill behind the headland. That's dried as well, and I want to make it more grey, but these are very prominent, so I don't want to distract from them. So I'm just doing up and down lines, all a bit vague and random, just to show that it's a headland with rocky sides, and then there's some grass on top. But water is spraying up a lot from the bottom, so it's much lighter at the bottom. So I'm going to get a wet brush, no colour on it, just go up from the bottom, just make it a bit lighter. And then I'm going to go in from the top with a very non-distinct green, which is sap green and yellow ochre. Not actually on the very top because there's a silhouette showing, but just a little bit, just to show that there is some grass coming down. And then nearer the end of the picture I'll adjust it to put in a few more dark areas, but I don't want to put it all in now. It needs to be at a certain distance tonally from the rest of the picture. So what I can do is just put a little hint of grey and brown mixed together in some areas. There's a lot of water bouncing up there, but just to bring it down a little bit further. Now I need to concentrate on this rock. So I need a number 1 brush again, and the dark mix. And the easy thing is there's a distinctive side. So I put that in. I let it dry because otherwise it would have just gone up into the rock behind. and then put the area coming forward in. And that's got a lot of water movement around it and on it. So I've just done an approximate shape. You can't be too accurate with these things. So if you're sketching on the spot, they're changing every moment. And when the next wave comes. And then just make this area a little bit smaller. Hint of water. Now these could be refined a little bit. There was a lot of water coming on this rock and it was going down, but I just go into them a little bit. Just make them a bit more delicate. Sometimes less is more with a picture. And to show that there's one area that's much darker. And I'm just going to put a squiggle in because not everything is straight. So now I'm moving on to the beach line. And the easiest way to do this is in the negative, is to put the blue behind the white spray. So I'm going to clean water, clean brush, and make the sea colour, which I want to be quite warm, in a contrast to the rocks. So I'm using Viridian and French Ultramarine as a start, and then adding a little bit of Payne's Grey. So I'm now going to paint in the negative. Now to do this, you could turn the picture upside down, but I'm just going to go in with a smaller brush. Go round the bouncing top of the waves that I've shown, where it's so windy that the water's blowing everywhere. So I've now gone up to the water, and what I need to do now is a clean brush and just take it back so there's more of a lost edge. And then go sideways to show that's the way the water goes. So now that's showing quite nicely. So I'll just move on and do a bit more. Just drop it into the nooks and crannies. And then move it with a bigger brush. And it's doing the work for you of changing the tone and making it show. So just go back again, drop a bit more in every now and again so it's not too even. And by making a dappled area behind, it again shows how well it's being thrown up with the wind and tide. So I need a bigger brush and a darker colour. So I'm using a little bit Payne's Grey because it's a very rough sea, it's very rough water. And I'm going to find some more dark areas. Go over the ones I did earlier. They were just put in very lightly to show what I had in mind. Now, I don't want them to look like pieces floating on the water, so I'm just losing the bottom edge of it and the ends. So they're a bit more vague. And I'm now going to put in the water to the horizon and behind the rocks. So I'm going to use a smaller brush for that. Same colour. Not go all the way up to the cliff because there is water breaking. So I'll do a lost edge there, just up and down movements to get a lost edge. It's important to let certain areas dry, otherwise you can't do this. And then to the horizon. I'm now adding a second blue, which I'm using the manganese blue, to go in between the waves, especially at the front here where they're very, very churned up. So just put in alternate colours to show that some of the water's going up, some areas are coming down. So you're catching highlights. And then at the front, there's more of a line where the water's going round rocks and creating a wave as it goes. So merging the two colours, and then a little bit of lighter water where it's going onto the rocky outcrops that I could put in a few highlights for shortly, and then building up to more surf again, and then a very dark line just going in. Just got to bring the changes. If you're not used to painting the sea, sit there for a minute or two, take some junk mail and sketch on the back of the envelopes, and then going across, I'm going to use the flat brush. It's very useful for going across water, as you can keep it level. Just put in a few marks just to show that it's not one sheet of water, it's all different facets. So just putting in the lines, then going back with the darker colour, putting the lines in between, and you can see that the waves are rolling into the beach. And at this stage there's not that much white water, it's just the gentle up and down movement of the waves. You can see that they're rolling in. You've just got to merge the colours. I will go back and reduce the pencil lines, but I wanted to put the pencil lines in to show you how the sea was going to develop. And then coming forward, I'm going to mix the two blues together to give a slightly different shade. Go into the water that I put down around the top of the wave. So now I need a different colour again, perhaps a slightly warmer colour. Mix a bit of French ultramarine with it and go round the waves, putting in a few shadows. So where it's bouncing back from the beach, it's not all white, it's got shadows in it. Then add some green. And just move the paint around. It's a very bright day, so it's only casting a little shadow. So I just want a gentle shadow where it's landing on the beach. On a darker day it would cast a deeper shadow, but it is quite bright. And then on the beach we're going to put a hint of sand. So I'm just using yellow ochre. Just going to put a little bit in and show that there's foam coming on top of it. And as with the sky, a solid line at the bottom, brighter colour, same colour but stronger on the brush, just to frame it. And then take that back as the foam is bouncing onto the beach as well. I've just mixed up a slightly lighter brown, slightly more grey, to put on the cliff, which is a little bit of my usual mix, trying different browns and a little bit of Payne's grey in it, just to make it in harmony with the rocks, but to be recessed. So I've gone up from the bottom and I'm now going around the top. I'll do a little bit more on that rock as well. And I need a darker top because it is slightly silhouetted. And just let it bleed into everything else. And I'm just clean the brush off, and I'm just bringing some of the paint down. Let it merge into what I've already put there. Now at the bottom there's surf coming up that's making the rock lighter, so I've got a big brush, it's quite a stiff brush, and I'm just going to put it on there in places to show that there's spray coming up. I want to fine tune it. Let's get the number 1 brush, just lose some of it. Now obviously I don't want marks further up the cliff competing with it, so I've got to make those a bit darker just to make sure it's all a bit. Now it does look like the spray's coming up. Now the next thing to do is to make the sea a bit warmer, and I'm going to get the flat brush again and just drop it in, because if the sea looks warmer and darker, the white surf will show a lot more and give better visual impact. But you have to put the pattern of the water on first. So I'm now changing the colour slightly and adding more green and turquoise. Just dropping that in. And then when that naturally runs out, I'm going to change the colour again. The sea is all little facets, it's not one solid mass. Following the pattern of the waves. Now I'm changing the colour again and changing the brush. And then go nearer the rocks. Just to give a suggestion. Doing it with a wiggle all the time, not straight. I'm going to take the water to the edge of the paper, brush it back in again, and then do the same with the horizon. I'm going to make that a bit warmer. Sometimes certain areas of a watercolour, especially like this is on rag paper which soaks in the paint, but it gives a lovely effect, will need a second coat. And then I'm just going to make this bit a bit darker because that will make the white look bolder where the waves are coming in. Now the surf that's hitting the beach needs to be a warm grey and perhaps a little bit of sand colour. So I'm going to make a homemade grey using Naples yellow and French ultramarine, Brazilian crimson. And the water will be picking up the sand colour, but at the moment, the way the light is, it's low light at this time of year, that the waves are causing their own shadow in front. So I'm just dropping in some paint and moving it around and leaving the bold white on top. And it's just something that you have to work out how you're going to do, but what I'm doing is trying to do the front of the waves in shadow and the foam, and then the bits that are actually facing the sky or facing out to sea are the white bits. I will add some sketches to this video that I did on the beach. Not this beach, another beach. I've got sketches of quite a few things, but I've got a book of wave sketches, and you'll see the pattern. I'm sure the other tourists thought I was batty sitting there for a couple of days drawing waves, but sometimes you think, oh, I must record this because it'll be useful in the future. And I want to put some sand in the bottom one, so I'm just getting some yellow ochre, and they will be picking up the sand as it comes ashore. So just doing up and down little strokes just to indicate that. Changing the intensity of the mix a little bit. Then I'll use some water just to move them around. So cleaning the brush off, I'm just going to lose some of the edges. And then when the water comes ashore, it frequently changes the colour of the sand. So I've just mixed some crimson with the sea colour. I'm just going to drop it in on the sand. Clean brush, and then just again lose the edge. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you'll go out with your telephone and take a photograph on a very windy day yourself and try painting it.